Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week is the brainworx Amek 2098 EQ. This is an amazing EQ that was actually built by Rupert Neve in the mid 90s. After finishing up with Focusrite in the mid late 80s, he started to contract services to Amek and came out with the 9098 and the 9098i. Now, I never worked on the full console, which is an emulation that brainworx is in the process of putting together. You'll see a little bit of that here with the TMT technology. So there will be a BX console. I'm not sure what the letter will be, if it'll be A or whether they'll save that for API. I guess we'll find out soon enough. But this was a rack mount EQ, the 9098, and I spent a lot of time working with this, and it's really amazing EQ. One of the things that Rupert was going after here with this particular EQ, he's wanted loads of headroom, a lot of clarity, minimum of distortion. So it's an amazing thing. And if you really look and read some of the reviews of the 9098i console that he came out with, one of the things that they say is that there's so much headroom that you don't really, it doesn't kick back anything like SSL consoles and many of the other consoles out there. You hit them and then they compress, or they kick back a little bit, and you can kind of work with that to sort of create a sound. So it's a little bit of a different animal here, but it's an amazing sounding EQ all the way around. So let's do an overview of it and take a look at some of the basic settings. We have an input gain control. This becomes important because as you start to add gain, there's no output gain control. So when you are working with it, you'll need to adjust the input gain as you add EQ if you want to create unity gain. You have high pass and low pass filters. You have a low shelving EQ. So the high pass, low pass filters can be placed in independently. The low shelf can be placed in independently. Each section can be done so independently, and then you have an overall bypass that occurs here. So I'll kind of push through that. The filters are 18 dB per octave, so they give you a fairly, kind of medium steep kind of slope, but still very musical. You have a low shelving EQ, and if you click on the shelf button here, you can turn it into a peaking EQ. There's a unique feature, a couple unique features here. One, you'll notice that the gain goes plus minus 18, but you can half that, which gives you more resolution in it. And this is actually something that used to be a big part of equalizers, going back earlier, into the 70s and 80s. There were a bunch of EQs that were created that had these like gain switches that would flip the amount of gain. And then there's an interesting feature called the glow. And what this does is it changes the shape of the curve. We're going to cut back to that in a second. So whether you're on a shelf or on a peaking EQ, the glow will change the shape of it in a very musical way. So it's interesting, and I'll show you what those characteristics are exactly. You have a low mid and a high mid frequency parametric EQ, again with the +9 switches. It also has a very unique feature, which is a notch filter, which is added in. You notice when I switch the notch here, now you automatically have 6 dB of takeaway. So now the scale switches from a plus minus to a purely subtractive thing. So it starts at a default of 6. And when you take that out, then it goes right back to the default of 0. That's a little bit different than the original. The notch existed there, but it would only work in the negative direction. And the cool thing about the notch EQ is that the filter or the Q control actually still works in there. It just gets super tight at a setting of 35, which is amazing for an analog piece, whereas if you had it here, it's only going up to 2. So it gives you quite a narrower scale or range. Same type of thing exists in the high mid frequencies. The range is not too dramatic. It goes from 100 to 1K. So I'm curious to see whether this will be extended on the console itself. I'm sure the filters on the TMT BX console version will probably have the ×3 divide by 3, just like you have on the other BX console E and G and all of those. And the high mid frequency is very much the same. You have a high frequency shelf, same type of setup, 2K up to 21K. You can also make it a peaking, and on the bottom where we have the glow switch, what we have up here is a sheen, and it does a very similar thing to what the glow does. And again, there's the plus minus 9. Now, what's not part of the original is all the stuff that's down here. So you can link or unlink the sides for stereo. You can operate it in MS, so this is not a normal feature that you would get working with them. You would just set them up side by side in the analog realm with the real piece here. But you can operate in analog or digital mode, which will make them slightly varied from each other. And then you have up to 20 channels, and that you can actually, sometimes you could set up an EQ and then toggle through random channels, and you might find something that has a little bit of a different character that you like better. That's a really cool way. I really love that feature with the mix, working with that random channel feature. Although, sometimes getting back to where you want, like if you find one you like, don't move or save it, do a save as or something so you can get back to it. What it also adds in is, and this again is not part of the original 1998 hardware, is the mono maker, right? So you get the mono maker, stereo width control, and THD, a harmonic distortion thing. So this is something that you see in the other BX console E's, so this will, I'm sure, be a part of the BX console that's used for this. You have input and output meters. Pre-EQ, post-EQ, and an output meter. And here with the stereo version, you don't get this with the mono version, but you have balance control and a correlation meter, so you can kind of check your phase. So loads of extra stuff in here, all the usual stuff that you see with the brainworx toolbar, so I won't get into any of that stuff. Let's make a little bit of noise, and let's take a look at what it sounds like. Oh, one other quick thing I just wanted to show you here. So what the glow and the sheen does, if you look here, this will show a peaking EQ. So if you set it that shelving, the low shelf, to a peaking EQ, what you'll see here, this is what the shape is. It's very sharp, almost API-like, where the Q narrows as you boost or attenuate. When you hit the glow switch, you could see how that broadens out that Q shape. There's also an interesting thing here. When it's in shelving mode, you'll notice that as you go, up in frequency here, you see that there's just a slight resonance there before the dip. But when you actually go to the glow setting, it stays very flat and smoother and covers a broader range of frequencies. So you can see how that will give you a kind of a little bit more of a musical kind of characteristic, right? So that's the low frequency. Here's the high frequency. Same type of thing here. So when you go to the high frequencies, you'll see the same sort of somewhat sharp or steep characteristic on the bell curve, and when you go to the sheen, you could see how it sort of spreads it out. And so that characteristic kind of shows up. You'll also notice there's kind of an interesting characteristic where as you go up higher in frequency on that shelf, that it kind of dips a bit. And even the one at a higher frequency, you see there's a resonance up there. So there's a few interesting things that happen a little bit more smoothly on the high frequency with the sheen set on. So there's a lot of confusion about that, what it is, and just thought that was worth taking a look at. So let's do a little bit of sound here. Just going to start with a bass sound here. I'll zoom in just so you can see what's going on. And so you could do sort of a classic thing here where maybe, we do a little shelving EQ, take that out of peak mode. This is also a great place for the harmonic distortion here. I'll just take this out for a second. I just want to show you something here. Generally, if what I've found here is if you crank this up, you will add about a dB and a half to 2 dB of gain to the audio signal. So if you do that, you might want to pull back your input gain a little bit. You hear how that gives it that edge though, which is really cool. So let's go back here. I'll just kind of put this in and then maybe do a little boost somewhere around 700 here. And with the Q, you got a pretty musical, you get a good musical range here where you can really set the focus in of the frequency boost. Maybe I'll spread that out a little more. So you get like a really great warmth to it and accuracy to it, and it's really amazing. It's kind of it's a great evolution if you're used to the Focusrite EQ, which has a very smooth characteristic, and I spent a lot of time on the Focusrite EQ at Electric Lady on the console there when I worked at Electric Lady years ago. And that console had an amazing sound to it. This sounds very different from that, but there's an accuracy that is very similar, a clarity that is very similar. So let's go on to just kind of adjust maybe a kick drum, just so you can kind of get an idea here of like that narrow Q. This also gives us a good idea with the glow. Actually, we could just do a quick thing on the bass with the glow, which I didn't do. Has like a nice, much warmer kind of vibe to it. So yeah, so I like that. Let's stay with the glow there. Let's switch over to the kick drum. So notice the difference here when I put the glow in there. So you get like a nice tight focused frequency somewhere around the fundamental. In this case, I think I like without the glow a little bit more of the focus setting, and then we could drive it a little bit. Has a little bit more body there without the harmonic distortion on it in this particular case. But I could also, I did a little dip there around 200 to tighten up that low end, maybe just like a little boost somewhere in the 1K area, just give it a little. Adjust the gain here. Right, just to bring in a bit more body, right? You could see how this kind of works. Let me just actually go through and skip over just to a snare drum, and let's see what we got here. This is probably where the glow will come in really nice with that wider Q here. So if I go here on a peak, I can get sort of a sub harmonic of the snare fundamental, which is probably more in the upper 100s, but I can go down here like an octave and see if I can get a little body out of it. And if I balance that off with maybe a little bit more like a 4.5K presence, in this case, the glow does not work for that, but leave that off. Give it a little more body. So again, you can see how the clarity and focus comes in. Let's listen to a little bit of music and then bring in a vocal so you can kind of hear what that sounds like. See how that brings in a nice, very musical kind of focus. So skip over to the lead vocal here for a second, and I think what I need to do is to unmute this, enable that group, and I think we should be good to go. All right, let's skip over to a verse here.
Mood, all these crazy feelings, what you expect me to do when it's late in the evening?
There's some parallel channels, but the EQ is grouped to both, so my changes here will happen on both sides. So if you look at the meter and you hear sound, that's what's going on. So this time I may have missed putting this in for the kick drum, which probably is why I left it out, because I didn't hear a difference, but let's see.
Mood, all these crazy feelings, what you expect me to do when it's late in the evening? And I tell you like, kiss me on my neck, tell me how you like it when.
It's kind of interesting here, like with the high pass filter, it goes up to 30K, and a lot of the design of this was having a good flat frequency response. Now, the console itself, the 98i, was flat up to 200 kilohertz. And I remember the Focusrite console that was at Electric Lady was flat, that he designed was flat up to 100K. And so I'm not sure. This probably scopes out in a very similar way, but you will see frequencies that exist above the supposed hearing spectrum.
Mood, all these crazy feelings, what you expect me to do when it's late in the evening? And I tell you like, kiss me on my neck, tell me how you like it when I walk in a room, baby, cause we always win. We got that fire.
See how like you got a nice body in there. Let me see if I can bring in a little bit of warmth down on the low end to kind of counteract that a bit.
Mood, all these crazy feelings, what you expect me to do when it's late in the evening? And I tell you like, kiss me on my neck, tell me how you like it when I walk in a room, baby, cause we always win. We got that fire that we just cannot contain.
really brings out an amazing amount of presence. And there's one other feature here where you can sweep the frequency, and that's using the notch EQ. I'm not sure how this will play with this, but let's see if we can pull out a little bit of the harshness and find it. Now, there's no way to solo up that band. So there's two ways to approach it. One way would be to sort of sweep it, push something in to it a little bit, and sweep and find it.
All these crazy feelings, what you expect me to do when it's late in the evening, and I tell you like, kiss me on my neck. Tell me how you like it when I walk in a room, baby, 'cause we always win. We got that fire that we just cannot contain.
You can kind of pull out a little bit of boxiness in a light kind of way. So let me switch it to a notch here. And then
Mood, all these crazy feelings, what you expect me to do when it's late in the evening, and I tell you like, kiss me on my neck. Tell me how you like it when I walk in a room, baby, 'cause we always win. We
you see how that takes away some of the harshness. Now, the Q control still works, so that's a pretty tight notch.
Mood, all these crazy feelings, what you expect me to do.
So here that covers a pretty much broader
and
range.
It's late in the evening, and I tell you like, kiss me on my neck. Tell me how you like it when I walk in a room, baby, 'cause we always win. We got that fire that we just cannot contain. And I like when you say my name. Had to find what I realize when I'm at you. You can look, but you won't find nothing better. And I like when you say my name.
So you could hear like how precision and how musical it is, and something like that, even if you use it by a small amount, super tightens up the Q, so you can do some really precision work. And considering this is like an analog piece, these types of features were not very common to EQs, even by the mid 90s, when this came out, I think in 93. So really amazing emulation. brainworx always does an incredible job. The THD, excuse me, the TMT, tolerance modeling technology, and then if you wanted to use it, even in a mix bus or mastering situation, having that extra feature there with the mono maker and the spread, all of that with controls really makes for an amazing addition. Another great one from brainworx, the Amek 2098. It's Mixing with Mike's plugin of the week.